So, Bungie has just released Vanguard Alerts this week, and with it, they've also brought back Grandmasters, finally. These are very similar to the GM Nightfalls that we used to have in Destiny before Edge of Fate. And they've even got some unique loot available to grind when you play these GMs. All Fireteam playlist drops have the chance to roll with the Accelerated Assault as an extra origin trait when completing the GM alerts, but you're going to have to get comfy and grind to get the exact roll that you want. Horror's Least is the focused weapon this week, meaning it will drop at the end of every single completion, and it has some really good PvP rolls alongside some really solid PvE rolls. So this is definitely the best time to grind. I would not pass up this opportunity because Horror's Least is one of the best legendary pulse rifles. And I will say one thing, these GMs are just the right difficulty. They're not as tough as Ultimate Avalon was last season, but the power delta is -50, which means you will be taking very similar amounts of damage to Ultimate Conquests. Fireteam power is enabled, so your fireteam mates can pull up your light level, allowing you to run whatever gear you want without it being as constrained as it was last season for the Ultimate Conquests. When you give this a run for yourself, it will probably feel a little bit easier than the Ultimate Conquest, because the AI is actually configured for Grandmaster, which is easier than Ultimate. But if you don't go in with a good build and some decent coordination, you will probably get floored. So that's why I wanted to get out this video as soon as possible, to share all the tips and suggestions that I have to help you farm Exodus Crash for Horror's Lease and the unique origin trait. Now, Exodus Crash has been reworked a few times since its release in Destiny 2, but I honestly think it's easier than ever, thanks to the sandbox and some of the changes that have come with Renegades. Once you're out of the cave at the very beginning and have dealt with all of the adds and the anti-barrier, you'll see some pikes off to the side. These pikes are the exact same ones from the Renegade campaign, and you should really use these. Use them to get through the opening section. The damage that these pikes can output has been cranked up for some reason, and with the Strand Surge active, they're doing even more damage than I think Bungie intended. So grab them and head towards the objective. Be super cautious right at the beginning, because there are a ton of fallen trip mines, and they will absolutely obliterate you and the pike. There are 4 fallen dropships in this opening section, and they will deal a decent amount of damage to you, so I strongly suggest taking out the turrets one by one with the pike. Most of them can be hit fairly easily, but the last dropship can be a bit difficult to line up with the pike, so you can either hop off and shoot it, or quickly move up to the left-hand side over here and shoot it with the pike. You'll take a little bit of damage from this spot, so just be a bit cautious. From here, you can push forward and deal with the overload, either have someone stun him or just land a well-timed suspend and absolutely steal his lunch money. The biggest reason to keep the pikes alive is actually to deal with the brig. They are great at killing the brig at the very beginning before it can become a revive token problem for you and your team. The brig can't be suspended, so don't waste your time to land the grapples. Just shoot it as soon as it spawns in and absolutely destroy it. Then just clear out the adds and push forward. You can keep the pike with you all the way up to the plate room, but they become really difficult to keep alive, so I don't really recommend bothering with it. This hallway has a ton of trip mines, so never trust your team and shoot them yourself. Now, once you reach the plate room, this is where a lot of teams are going to struggle. The ad density is pretty good and the damage coming at you is pretty intense. So you're able to get a lot of builds rolling, but the ad spawns are actually tied to the plate progress. My biggest tip, if you're struggling to deal with the ads, then you shouldn't capture all of the plate. Have one person capture the plate and then step off whenever the ads spawn. This will let you pace the fight much better and it will make things way easier, but it's a fair bit slower. At 50%, the plate capture will just stop and you have to face the first big fallen boss. The plate will be locked until it's dead, and you don't need to defeat all of the enemies to restart the plate. It's just kill the boss. Something useful to know about the fallen boss is he will regularly launch stasis crystals at you. He doesn't personally shatter them though, like some of the Dread will, but you and your team can accidentally do that with your abilities. They do a fair bit of damage to you, so just be mindful if you are using something like a Consecration Titan. However, if you don't clear out the ads after killing the boss, the next wave of enemies will spawn on top of the existing enemies, and it will start to get a bit hectic. This can be quite a mess, especially because anti-barriers will spawn at the 50% mark. and they will protect everything around the middle of the field. The last piece of info I have for this section is if you're planning to step on and off the plate all the way up to 100, the last set of adds will spawn around 90 to 95%. This is the last set of enemies full stop before the boss spawns. Nothing else will spawn with him. So if you want to make fighting this boss as easy as possible, just step off the plate at 90% and add clear before finishing this encounter. You will need to clear everything in this area to progress. So in one way or another, everything must die. Once you're done and pushed into the next area, you'll have to defeat 3 priority targets which each drop an arc charge. You need to collect the arc charge that is dropped and deposit it in the machine kinda near failsafe. Just a couple of things to note in this area. When you create an arc charge, you have 30 seconds to pick it up and deposit it. Otherwise the enemy will respawn and you have to defeat them all over again. This includes the champion. This is kinda important for the Hydra because he will constantly shoot down from above. But if you kill it, you'll need to run someone up to the top and pick it up before the Hydra respawns. Lastly, the Wyverns and Overloads won't really push you, so it's fairly safe to just stick around the deposit point, but they still hit pretty hard, especially if you stand still, so just keep moving. It's possible to blind or suppress the Wyverns if that makes it safer for you and your team, so just keep that in mind if you want. Once you're through the tunnel and out into the next section, if you're paying attention, you'll see another set of pikes. Definitely grab these, because they're really helpful for dealing with the enemy pikes, dropships, and spider tank. So hop in, deal with the enemy pikes that immediately spawn, and then keep to the right. Once someone pushes far enough up, you will have one wave of enemies spawn behind you, where I suggest just standing so you can spawn camp them and can save yourself some hassle later. Just keep the high ground against the spider tank and attack one leg at a time. Should be very easy for you with these pikes. Move on through the dark room and then finally you will enter the boss room. There are 2 places I recommend standing. Either drop straight down and just stand around the spawn area. Only a handful of enemies will actually push you throughout the fight and it can be quite dangerous unless you have Song of Flame for resistance or Sentinel Shield or Well of Radiance for protection and healing. The alternative spot is the OG boxes on the far left. Stand on top of these and you'll be protected from all of the enemies at close range, but you will be very easily shot at, so I strongly recommend using Sentinel Shield if this is the strategy you want to go with. Now the boss room has 3 phases. The first phase is really simple, with a few waves of enemies and the boss in ranged mode. Once he reaches 50% of his health, all of the fallen enemies will despawn and they will be replaced by Vex. At this stage, you will have 1 overload and 1 anti-barrier. The overload spawns right on top of you if you are standing at spawn, and the anti-barrier will always come from the right hand side. There are some Harpies and Fanatics, but these will constantly respawn. The only way to stop the Vex and progress to phase 3 is eliminating the Hydra and depositing the Arc Charge. Doing this immediately starts phase 3, so just make sure your team is ready for this. The boss will now be in melee mode. He will aggressively push you with swords and is extremely evasive. He's pretty painful to hit. All you have to do at this stage is just whittle his health down and eliminate him to complete the strike. Completing this GM for the first time this week will guarantee a Horror's Least with the unique origin trait, but after that, it's all RNG. Now, we tried a ton of different loadouts and team compositions today to get the best idea of what's working really well and really consistently. Having at least 1 Ursa Titan on Sentinel Shield made a massive difference. This is the OG strat, and it still works. Having them block a ton of damage meant the rest of us could just focus solely on DPS ourselves instead of survival and evasion. The remaining 2 fireteam slots were then very flexible, and I'll break down some of the best options per class. I honestly think Titans are the strongest for this strike. If you are a Titan, having another Sentinel Titan was safer, but resulted in the run being a lot slower. I actually had a lot of fun and success running Collective Obligation with Ursa Furiosa, especially after the rework that Collective Obligation got at the start of Renegades. It was extremely easy to get all 3 Void debuffs going, and the suppression was extremely useful against Overloads and the Wyverns. Alternatively, running Arc with Peacekeepers and Barrow Dyad actually did really well because of the Strand Surge. It gives the team access to Bolt Charge, and Barrow Dyad in itself is just a monster with Peacekeepers, especially for single target damage, allowing you to easily solo Overloads and anti-barrows with just your primary. Consecration is always a great option, but there are a handful of exploding units in this strike, so melee-focused builds have to be extremely cautious that they don't get caught on an exploding shank. Solar Threat is active, so this makes them even more deadly. For hunters, Tether with Orpheus rigs had great crowd control and also generated enough orbs for the solo Sentinel Titan to maintain their super almost indefinitely. For Warlocks, I wouldn't really recommend running a Lightning Surge build. Unlike Titans, the slide melee will pull you way too close to exploding units, and it's very risky. It's still potent, but if you blow up, you'll just be a liability to the team. A Controverse Hold and Axion Dart build does way better because of the high damage output and safety that it provides. It can be extremely useful in the plate area as well as the boss room, and I felt it was just much stronger than the Nothing Manacles builds that are going around at the moment. Now, as for which weapons are worth running, as I said, because Strand Surge is active, any Strand weapon will receive a 25% damage boost, including abilities. Because of this, Barrow Dyad was putting in a ton of work even without Peacekeepers. With Overload SMG, you could just lay into a champion and never have to swap weapons. If you want to use Overload Pulse instead, Outbreak also performed really well, and with Kinetic Rupture and Kinetic Synthesis from the artifact, it made the unique ammo bricks and weak points very regularly. This paired with the Heavy Sniper will basically result in infinite heavy ammo, which you can use to take down the champions and the bosses very easily. However, in saying that, I do think Barrow Dyad is the better choice unless everyone in the team decides to run Outbreak. In the energy slot, Uncivil Disclosure is great for dealing with snipers at range, without relying on a heavy, but it's not very good for the anti-barrier champions. It felt just a bit too slow to break the anti-barriers, and it was way too dependent on landing multiple crits back to back. So I would tend to keep this in my back pocket solely for use on snipers or arc shields. Alternatively, you could run Sire Turner, the new rocket pulse rifle, since it would provide another source of overload and it does decent damage. The only drawback is that the ammo economy nerf that rocket pulses received in Renegades feels kind of rough in the harder content now. In the heavy slot, the best weapon for this strike is definitely the Heavy Sniper refurbished A499. This does an excellent job of breaking anti-barriers and handling the super chunky bosses. It does massive damage to the kinetic ruptures, making it capable of one-shotting a full health champion without any stun needed. And the ammo economy with kinetic synthesis is fantastic. You could go with a sword or a good shout, or Acreus, or Finality's Auger. There's a bunch of options, but the Heavy Sniper is just too good to pass up with its synergy with the artifact for the ammo economy and the amount of damage that it outputs. So give these team compositions a try if you've been struggling to secure a completion, and let me know in the comments if you've got a different team comp that is doing really well for you. I'm still looking for a faster and just as consistent setup for my own team, so please let me know. So with all of that said, get out there, get to grinding some rolls, and as always, have a wonderful rest of your day.